Hi all, I'm Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to fuse fine silver wires to a backsheet. Fusing is a lot of fun, but pretty tricky when you're first starting out. So I'm going to give you some of my expert advice on how to do it right. So, ochre, clay-based soil, dirt. We are going to be fusing some fine silver circles down, and then we're going to granulate within them. So we're going to do that in the kiln because it adds a background heat for us, which is good. But silver, fine silver, when it fuses, it gets very liquid, like it really starts wiggling around. So if you do that and the back of it gets too liquid, it sticks to the kiln. So you don't want that. So what we do is put a light coat of ochre on the back. I mean, ochre is gross, it's dirt, nobody likes it, but it's a necessary evil in cases like this. But to point out, you don't actually want a thick coat of ochre. It's surprisingly insulating because it's clay-based. So in other words, if you put like a really thick coat of ochre on the back and then you try to fuse from the front, you might not be able to get it hot enough. So what I did is I put a little on there and I took a damp paper towel so that's, you see what I mean? That kind of like schmeary coat, not too thick.
Like a decaying.
Yes, exactly. And then I usually either like with my torch or whatever, we're gonna dry it off and then we can flip it over and set your wire on there. Now because ochre is so like gross and it being dirt and all, you just really wanna be careful about getting it on your bench. Like you don't wanna get it spread around here and spread around places and then it's on your hand and on your tools and on your tweezers and before you know it, you've got it all over the place. Because any place that you're trying to fuse or solder will not appreciate the a little bit of ochre being in there.
So it gets very dark.
Yeah, it'll kind of get black and then it usually sort of goes to reddish bleh color, like sort of like bleh. Like that. And you notice, very important to turn up that little corner. Yeah, I'm gonna actually put that right there. Got one of your little wires. Place it there lovingly. Now, really important when you fuse is that you have great contact everywhere. Because even if you're a genius at fusing, if you don't have contact, it's not going to fuse together nicely. So normally what I do is I'm going to use my, high-tech equipment, my big wood stick, and press down and really make sure that I have great contact. When I put it in the kiln, I'm also going to look and see and make sure I have good contact everywhere. And if I don't, I'll choose the best areas, start there, press a little bit.
In the kiln.
In the kiln.
Okay.
Because it's, the bigger the wire, the naughty truth is, everyone will always tell you like everything has to be flat, everything has to be in perfect contact. Like, yes, but there are times where it seems genuinely not possible to get it touching everywhere at the, you know what I'm saying? Like you have especially like big, you know what I mean? The bigger the back sheet, the bigger the wires. So in that case, rather than suffer forever, I usually pick a really good spot. You know what I mean? Make sure I've got really good contact in that spot and I start either fusing or soldering there. And as it's hot, it's no big deal once it's tacked, even in one little tiny spot, to just take your tweezers and press a tiny bit and everything is beautiful and fantastic.
While in it?
While in it.
Okay.
It might be a tiny bit pro mode, but I'm gonna teach it to you because there are just times that I don't care how many times you flatten that fucking back sheet, how many times you anneal and press and whatever. It is, I mean, this is not enormous, but it's getting bigger. And the bigger it gets, the harder it gets. And there are just times where it's like, you can't not start until they're all touching perfectly because you can't always get them to touch perfectly. Okay, so I've confessed the naughty secret to you. And there you have it. So press. There's a certain point you're like, dude, I gotta do this. Like, so. And I suspect that that's true of everybody, but they don't tell you because they don't want to look bad. Okay? So I think that looks good. I'll move and let Alexis get a close-in shot. But again, once I put this in the kiln, before we start fusing, I'm gonna give it a good hard look and make sure that at least where I'm starting, I have good contact. Okay? every jeweler in the world is able to get it touching every single place, and I can't. I'm not saying I'm not, you know, I don't have the possibility for me nice and dark in there, but doing this also helps to keep the heat from escaping too much, you know, so. Got it, so. Boop. Now I'm not bothering to glue this down because it's one wire. If this one wire moves a millimeter to the left or the right as I'm putting it in the kiln, it really doesn't matter. You could, but in this case, it's just not necessary. Pick it up, keep it level, place it where you want it, and then let go. Now granted, this one wasn't glued, so it wasn't as dangerous, but when you have like a whole bunch of granules and they're glued down and you're putting them in there, you don't want any extra tilting, you know, any kind of problem. You want to like just, you want everything in your favor. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 0 tip. If this is my piece, my flame straight up and down, heating up the whole thing. When the edges of the back sheet start to get shiny and melt a little bit, that tells me it's hot enough to fuse. And I kind of take that and take my flame like a paintbrush and push it across and push it across. And I'm also going to be, you know, looking at the connection between the wire and the back sheet. And if there's any place that looks like it's not touching nicely, after I get it tacked in a spot, I'll just take my tweezers. Once it's tacked in a spot, it takes practically nothing to press it down. You know what I mean? When nothing's attached, you try to press that little stinker down and it just pops up and pops up. Okay? You know, it looks like it's making good contact though, but when I get it hot, the contact points glow brighter, and that's when I feel like you really see if you've got a little tiny gap or not. Okay? Nice hard flame. I apologize for my elbow, but you got to get your elbow up.
So it doesn't look like you're on top of it.
I'm
outside
more or less right next to it. And you notice how the color starts to change. Things start to get kind of a little more orangey. What I'm waiting for is the shine at the edge. Yep. See that? You see that little edge? Like I'm gonna do a little bit more, but once you start seeing that, that's what tells me. Yeah, you see what I mean? That you can get in there with your bad self. I do that. That back spot right here is up a tiny bit, so I'm just gonna do that. Like I said, once it's tacked in an area, it doesn't take much at all, you know, to just press it back down in. Okay? Build up the heat again. And you can see where we've flowed it and where we haven't, because it gets nice and shiny. You know, because the fine silver actually becomes liquid and really travels. Okay, see that? Ooh, like that.
Nice.
Okay? So we'll take it out and we'll check it, and obviously if there was any spot that wasn't done, we would do a little bit more. But, you know, the whole key with this is to get the whole thing hot, get that little liquid, and I really visualize it like it's wet paint. You take that brush and you push it where you want it to go. Because what I want is I want the back sheet to flow underneath the wire. Because if you think about this as like, I'm gonna get the wire hot and I'm gonna melt the wire to the back sheet, the wire will get too hot and ball up. You know what I mean? You're thinking about the back sheet getting it hot and having it travel, and as it travels, it like picks up the wire with it. You know what I mean? So it's important. It's the same thing with granulation. It's that same thing. If you concentrate too much on what you're adding, you get the smaller area, the wire, the granules too hot, and they ball up and melt to each other, rather than getting the whole thing hot enough and making all those beautiful little connections. So for me, that's the big thing that took me a long time to understand. Like, ignore the granules, ignore the wire, pay attention to the back sheet. Okay? So here's a macro view. And I was just very rudely saying, I'm not gonna lie to you, that's some pretty fucking pristine back sheet. So, see what I mean? And you can see just by that little shine, I got the back sheet to flow all the way underneath that wire, and that's really what it's all about. Okay? So Susie, now you just have to do, a few of your own. And then we will begin to granulate.